Welcome to the weird and wonderful life of the past life detective. Today's podcast is called Locations, Dates and Circumstances, Connecting the Dots to a Past Life. Thomas Boleyn, father to Anne, Mary and George Boleyn. In her last blog, Rosa discovered 8 locations that she'd lived or worked nearby to, which connected her to her medieval past lives. One was Mary Boleyn, Anne's older sister. Rose was also the older sister in her family, which was one of the familial patterns that she discovered. Another was that her father, Harold, was born in the same year as his past life, only 400 years earlier, as Thomas Boleyn. Here is a little information about this successful and powerful diplomat and father of Mary Boleyn. Thomas Boleyn, Earl of Wiltshire, 1st Earl of Ormond, 1st Viscount of Rochford, born in 1477, died on the 12th of March 1539, of Hever Castle in Kent. He was an English diplomat and politician who was the father of Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, and was thus the maternal grandfather of Queen Elizabeth I. Date and number synchronicities. As she wrote this blog, she realised that Thomas had died when he was 62, which is her age at the time of writing, having turned 62 a month previously. Here was another soul family number connection, which was a thread running throughout her book. Rose found that key dates can connect us through time and space. These can be cross-connecting births, marriages, deaths, or just the age of the person in the soul group that they're connected to. This is what she loved about being the past life detective. It was always an exciting adventure, discovering the clues on the breadcrumb trail. Now for some more key clues. Location synchronicities. Rose's father had married her mother Constance and immediately moved from Surrey to a little-known village on the north coast of Norfolk, near his new work post in Trimingham. Not long afterwards, Rose was born. As covered in her book, Past Lives That Matter, Rose realised that this was a location synchronicity to her past life as Mary Boleyn, as she was born just 20 minutes' drive away at Blickling Hall. So this was also a location synchronicity for her father Harold, who then moved the 6-month-old Rose away to pursue another career. Thomas Boleyn had done exactly the same thing and relocated the family to Hever Castle in Kent, southeast England. Mary was also very young, and it seems that her brother and sister, Anne and George, were then born at Hever Castle. Rose's future siblings were also born in Kent, as this is the same county that Rose's father chose to settle with his young family. Another synchronicity. In fact, he was just half an hour's drive from Hever Castle, and has remained in Kent for the rest of his life, as did Thomas and his wife, Elizabeth Howell. Strangely, Rose's middle name is Elizabeth, and her father's mother came from the Howard family. Howard and Howell are very similar sounding names. More synchronicities. She'd spent most of her childhood in West Sussex after Harold divorced her mother Constance when Rose was 7. He had then moved to Kent to be with his second wife, and there they had children and stayed in fairly close proximity to Hever Castle for decades to come. In West Sussex, Rose also found herself living just a half an hour drive from Hever Castle, but on the opposite side. That was until she got married and moved to Switzerland for some years. Funnily enough, Mary Boleyn's second husband, William Stafford, had also moved to Switzerland after her death, with his new wife and family, to escape the Catholic Mary I. This was another Soul Tribe location synchronicity, as Rose's first husband had lived in England and also moved to Switzerland to be with his family. Oddly, Rose married him on the very same date, the 4th of February, that Mary Boleyn had married her first husband, William Carey, on the 4th of February, 1520. During Mary's childhood, she was educated to the elite standards of the aristocracy and was a bright young thing. Thomas and Elizabeth were extremely ambitious parents, and he wielded some influence at court. He held the title Sheriff of Kent for 6 years, and his many positions of influence in Henry VIII's circle led to a highly advantageous role for Mary Boleyn as maid of honour to King Henry's sister Princess Mary, whom she accompanied to France when she married King Louis XII. Mary was lucky enough to stay on at the French court when Louis died 6 months later, and the young King Francois I took the throne. There she stayed for 5 years, which is the same length of time that Rose had lived abroad as well. As discussed in her previous blog, Rose had returned from Europe and come to live in locations that had tied her further to her Tudor roots, near Knowle Park and Otford Palace in Kent, and eventually Greenwich Palace in London. In her latter years, Rose moved to Norwich to start a new life. The first synchronous location she moved to was in King Street, the oldest street in Norwich. Oddly, King Street was also where Mary Boleyn's great-grandfather, Sir William Boleyn, a knight, had owned a trading building. It was number 28, listed as Sir William Boleyn's city house. No doubt Thomas Boleyn and his young family would have visited there. So once again, by moving back to her roots in Norfolk, Rose had chosen to settle a 20 minutes drive away, but this time to the south of Blickling Hall in Norwich. Family estrangement synchronicities. As discussed before, Rose had experienced religious shunning from her mother and stepfather when she left the cult they belonged to in her early 30s. There was, though, another form of estrangement during her childhood that again tied to her family experience as Mary Boleyn in her past life. The divorced Mary had been banished from the royal court by Henry and Anne when she secretly married a soldier beneath her station. The love of her life and second husband, William Stafford. This had resulted in Mary losing not only all contact with anyone in her family, but they also cut her annual allowance and any rights in their will and estates. Just as devastating had been the estrangement of Rose from her father when she was just 7, because his divorce of her mother had led to him losing any visiting rights to his 2 daughters for the next 20 years. Rose had experienced abandonment first from her father, then from her mother when she left her religion. She realised this past life pattern of disownment was repeating itself, and she'd undertaken the shadow work necessary to clear this karmic abandonment situation. You can find out more about this protocol in the link in the description box of this video. Happily for Rose, when she divorced and left the cult, she and her sister tracked down their birth father, Harold, who was still living in Kent. They found him in a neighbouring village to Sevenoaks. Rose chose to settle here and begin a new life, getting to know her father again after all those years apart. This is how she came to live near the Tudor Knowle House and the once glorious Otford Palace, where she lived in Tudor Avenue, and was again not far away from Hever Castle. The past life detective felt that her father Harold had not followed his past life pattern of estrangement because he had welcomed her back into his life and into his new family with joy and happiness. That was over 30 years ago, during which time she slowly healed and learned the true circumstances of her abandonment. Eventually she was able to forgive him and move forward. She continues to enjoy her second family to this very day, all of whom still live in Kent. To determine a person's key connections to their past lives, it is said that often a soul feels comfortable in familiar situations and circumstances and chooses to return to these to work out any details they feel were left unresolved in a past life. Any negative or karmic experiences could be what draws our higher self to return, with a view to releasing and healing any past trauma patterns. Find out more about the Past Life Detective's offerings, including a free half-an-hour consultation to either explore your own past lives or to do a soul contract release. Read more about many other past lives and synchronicities of Rose and her soul tribe in her book Past Lives That Matter, How to Remember, Heal and Transform Them. All links will be in the description box below.